Today's patient is an Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. It's got problems with the RB bumper and the right stick with some intermittent input. You can see this right stick as it doesn't snap back into the center. It's got a bit of stick drift on it. Triggers work alright, but that left bumper just isn't registering all hits. The other problem is this controller is absolutely disgusting and needs a complete refurbishment. So we're going to clean the hell out of it too. Getting started here, we're going to take off the magnetic components. Inspect all the nasty grime and dead skin cells in all of these crevasses. Ugh. These are a bit tough to get popped open, so it's nice and easy to start in the top left corner because there's a little more meat, so you're less likely to fracture the plastic. This is the hardest part of the job because you have to both be gentle and aggressive at the same time to get this glue to pop off and all these little small tabs to break loose. I'd recommend once you're able to get a pick in or get some sort of tool in first, take another pick, another tool, and then start trying to keep the one piece open while you work down the rest of the controller. After a bunch of frustration, I got it popped open enough that I could get some tweezers in there to pull out a little bit of that glue to make this side open up a bit easier. You'll see the glue right in the middle of that left handle. Once you get to the right side, you just got to be a little extra careful because the B button has very little material next to it, so it's easy to break that part. What ended up really getting me stuck was there's a little bit more glue right above the home button that I had trouble getting off. But eventually I got it. We're going to try to get this thing as clean as possible, so I want to make sure I get all this old glue out of the controller body. Took a fair bit of scraping and a little bit of alcohol to try to clean off all this residue and make this as clean of a mating surface as possible for when the controller goes back together. Definitely feel like the alcohol helped soften up some of this glue that was stuck on there. And that's about when I had the alcohol out that I decided to start cleaning this guy up to try to get all this grease and grime out of these buttonholes. Might have worked better to put it in a bath of alcohol or in a dumpster, but here we are putting some work in on it to try to clean it up as best we can. Felt like the cotton swab wasn't quite getting in deep enough, so I had to take out my tweezers and use the little metal edge gently to try to get out some more of this grime. But on the edges here is where I really needed the tweezers to be able to pick out all the flesh that was stuck in it. And then it just needed a nice little scrub-a-dub rub. Most of these clips are ×8 or ×20. We're now 3 minutes in, and you can imagine how long this took me in real time when it wasn't sped up. And here's our first problem. See that little crack there? So I'm going to mix up a little bit of 2-in-1 epoxy and try to just strengthen up that joint. I like to think that it came like that and it had nothing to do with how much prying I had to do to get the glue off of the controller. I had to make sure that this was a very thin layer because the tolerances are so tight in the controller the buttons probably won't register well. So once I got it in there and I got it bridging that gap, I decided to flatten it out as best I could after. But that'll help strengthen it up just so it doesn't crack any further. So let's keep going at the controller. Some pliers or vice grips might be needed to grab onto the controller stick body to be able to loosen it up, but it's just screwed in. Definitely recommend using the actual controller magnetic topper to help finish twisting it off once you get it broken though. Then with all the parts pulled off, there's 6 screws on the front of the controller. I believe that's a T8 bit. Make sure nobody's looking and then pop off this little warranty sticker. And that gets you the last screw. After all the screws are removed, there's a nice pry point underneath the rumble packs here. will help pop the controller out of its little body. For as horrible as the outside look, the inside really doesn't look too bad. You can see there in the middle of the screen, the bumper is making contact and we're getting good depression of that tactile switch. I think the switch itself is just bad though. Since I'm doing a full refurbishment here with bumpers and switches, I'm just going to unsolder these pieces. Desoldering these definitely makes the job a little bit easier, but probably isn't completely necessary. There are 2 more T6, I believe, screws that hold the motherboard in place, and then you can slide it off the posts. Also going to pop these little cables off under this piece of tape here. Got to be gentle with these too, because they're easy to smash the small little metal connection tabs as well. With all that off, give it a little push near the joysticks, and that'll help pop straight out and off the metal tabs on the back. I didn't realize the headphone port was just set in place, so I was a little nervous here when parts just started falling out of the controller.
Ruh-roh, Raggy.
Just need to keep gently prying straight up to get it off the posts. You may need to move the triggers just a little bit if they're getting caught on the right and left trigger. To get the LB and RB button bracket off, you want to start by prying off the top little middle tabs here. And then on the right and leftmost portions of the RB and LB button, there's another small tab on the outsides of the controller. That's what actually retains the right and left bumper as you depress and it springs back. The trick is to pull away from the center as well as up to get it to clear that small plastic tab without breaking it. But take your time or you're going to have to do some funky business to get that thing re-glued in or something. But once one side's done, you should be able to just slide it off the other side. We're finally about as far into this controller as we can break it down. It's about time to start cleaning it up and getting things put back together. After 4 more T6 screws. I was awfully surprised how clean the inside of the controller was with how nasty and dirty the seams were. Luckily, the buttons only fit in a specific spot and order, so you don't have to worry about remembering which one goes where. The right bumper and left bumper take a fair bit of heat to get off the board, so I decided to pop these cables off just to make sure that I wasn't going to melt any plastic on the board. So a little bit of fresh solder to lower the melting temperature, a little bit of flux to improve the flow of the solder, and a little bit of cursing and a fair bit of time. Since we got this deep into it, I decided to do both of them just for longevity's sake. The ground plane and the bumpers really sink heat pretty well, so it takes a lot of heat and a fair bit of time to get these through holes cleaned out well so the next part can lay extremely flush. The tolerances, again, are so tight that it's hard for the controller to go back together if it isn't done well. I ended up using Xbox One R and LB buttons, which are slightly taller and slightly different pin spacings, but just a slight little bend of these tabs to straighten them out helped them slide in real flush and sat real nice in the controller. As they say in the business, that is a toit fit. It took me all the way until I had completely reassembled the controller to realize that the RB and LB buttons are actually a little bit taller than the Series 2 controllers. So I had to go back in and trim down the tops just a little bit so it sits in there and depresses more readily. But with those installed, it's time to move on to the sticks. Boy, if I was frustrated with the RBLB buttons, these sticks sink way more heat. I ended up taking a big old chisel bit out and just dumping heat into the board to be able to get these through holes cleaned out, and that helped a ton. Some manufacturers actually make a soldering bit that fits the controller stick pin out so that you can heat them all up exactly at the same time and get the controller to drop out more readily. But I got there eventually, and then it just needs a good cleaning with some IPA to get it ready for the new part. It's nice to clean up for the refurbishment process here, but more importantly, the controller won't go back together well if there's any change in the angulation of the stick. So we need to make sure that everything sits in really nice and flush. I like it a lot. I decided to tack solder in 2 of the easier legs to solder so that I can flip it over and really sink heat into it to get the solder on some of the grounding pins. So once both of those are tacked in, I can flip it over to the other side. After all that soldering work, then it's time to clean it up and get it put back together. Really happy with this new fume extractor that I picked up to try to keep a little bit healthier in the lungs. Before I was just vaping like all the cool kids. If you're somehow still watching, appreciate you being here. Why don't you subscribe or like the channel so I know you're watching, and then I'll keep making videos. They're fun for me. I enjoy doing them. But I appreciate the support. Once you get all the solder joints touched up real nice and satisfactorily, I'm going to put a little bit more alcohol on there to clean some of the flex residue off, and then take a little bit of time putting this back together. But first we need to clean the bejesus out of this thing. Like someone was using a pumice stone on their hand while doing woodworking in their shop playing Xbox, with all the dirt, dust, and debris that was in this controller's corners and crevices. So here's a little cleaning montage. Gosh, this stuff was gross. So with all that done, let's get back into the final reassembly. First we got to get those cables stuck back in place and run through their little tracks. And here I'm going to extend the length of my repair again. Do you notice what I'm doing wrong? Something doesn't quite feel right, but I can't figure out what. Doesn't look wrong, but then got the screws put in, and what else is supposed to go in the front there? The buttons. Visible confusion. Son of a... The screws got to come out, and then we got to get everything put in first. But if you wouldn't have guessed it, we got to clean all these buttons up as well. Again, they all have little tabs that are specific to each button, so the A can't go in the B and the X goes only in the X. That makes it pretty easy to put together. Just get everything to stay and lay in place while you're doing the rest of the components can be a little tricky. But this little rubber tab that depresses the switches and buttons goes right in over there. One more little screw up in there. You can see the select button that changes your profile there actually needs to go on top of the gray shield. That's better. Definitely recommend starting on one corner here, getting it gently pressed into place on that retaining little clip, and then slowly and carefully retained back into each little clip slot. Here's where I noticed the bumpers aren't actually depressing the way they should because they're the old Xbox One bumpers. I was hoping as the rest of the controller gets back together that there's a small springing mechanism in there that actually lifts it back off the bumper. So I hoped and prayed and did not get my prayers answered. Gotta gently slide the green board back in under the triggers along the metal tabs and poles. Try to get these small wires gently pressed back into place. And yes, I did keep this cute little sticker to put back on that right trigger. We had to solder back on those motherboard connections. The red one goes on top. Got to get the vibration assembly put back in and soldered up as well. Quick little tap with the irons and all you need here. And this back plate should just gently snap into place. You didn't forget any of those screws we looked at earlier, did you? Don't force anything because that's when the controller's going to get ruined. One last little whack with a cotton bud and some alcohol. Get the joysticks screwed back down. A nice firm tighten. They should sit flush and rotate smoothly around in a nice easy circle. Gave them just a little snug with my vice grips to keep them on nice and snug. Those final 6 screws should then go back in place, and if we had another warranty sticker, we should probably put that back on, right? But now she's ready for a test. Let's put her up on the monitor. Oh, that's nice. Except that right stick is still drifting really poorly. And look at our circularity, not ideal. Good thing Xbox has a nice recalibration app. Once quick recalibration and this thing's running smooth. And you know, game on.